what he's learned at French business school in Bangui on the local Wagner beer.
All of this made Wagner popular in the Central African Republic. Some local politicians credit the group with bringing stability to the country. And Wagner has such broad support, there's a statue in Bangui that honors the group.
Well, it's a statue basically of soldiers showing, protecting, local children and family, basically. I mean, that's really a reminder of the role that Wagner played in protecting Bangui and the government, against rebels. And it's interesting that every reference, that is made to it is to Wagner, so not Russia. So, in a way, Prigozhin is dead, but his legacy, the Wagner brand, the autonomous, role that Wagner plays in Africa remains.
Wagner has successfully embedded itself in daily life in Bangui. But it's not all beer and statues for Wagner in Africa. There's a darker side. That's next. Over the last few years, Wagner's work on the continent of Africa has expanded beyond the Central African Republic. The group helped local paramilitary forces fight a civil war in Sudan.
Sudan, another major gold producer, has seen extensive Wagner involvement in mining and extraction, which continues despite the months-long conflict.
Wagner fighters were briefly deployed in Mozambique to help fight Islamist rebels there.
The conflict is already taking a massive toll, with nearly 700,000 people displaced as a result of the violence.
And French officials say that Wagner-led disinformation has encouraged military coups and the expulsion of Western troops from countries like Mali and Burkina Faso.
And the United States says it's concerned about Wagner's destabilizing influence in Africa and has accused...
Each country that Wagner has entered has been pulled deeper into Russia's sphere of influence.
Wagner would do the homework before they come in. They very often send political scientists. And so what they map is, ethnic groups, X, against another one. The one holding the power right now is this one, very often in the capital. How can we reinforce that group and create either alliances with specific groups or, on the other hand, crush adversaries that very often are not just on political lines, but also on ethnic lines.
And why does Putin want influence in the continent of Africa?
So if you think about the map, you have a direct, almost frontal war against NATO in Ukraine. And if Russia sort of starts, having a strip of land of influence that goes all the way from Sudan to the West African coast, a few hundred miles from countries like Italy or France, then the power to be in resistance against NATO and Europe is going to be extremely significant.
Wagner fighters across Africa have been accused by the U.S. government and international human rights organizations of kidnapping, raping, and killing civilians. The group has also faced resistance. In December of last year, Dmitry City was injured in an attack on a Russian cultural center he runs in Bangui.
The letter bomb, according to Prigozhin and himself, is sent to his office, explodes, and he loses several fingers. He goes around in every picture ever since with a black glove. It sort of gives a sense that, behind his fairly, really, again, innocent appearance, his life is not as light, maybe, as it outwardly seems.
After that incident, City left the Central African Republic to recover at a Russian hospital. He returned to Bangui this spring. Soon after, things for the Wagner group started changing, fast. City's boss, Yevgeny Prigozhin, was openly criticizing Russian officials. And then...
We begin this morning with our top story, spiraling tension in Russia. Breaking overnight, President Vladimir Putin vows to punish mercenary troops mounting an armed uprising in Russia.
Where was City when Prigozhin led that rebellion against Putin in June?
So as far as we know, he was in Bangui. And later on, he gave an interview to one of the Prigozhin-connected African outlets and said, I'm continuing to work here, and I thank Evgeny Prigozhin for all the great work that he's done. So he, for the first time, it was the most explicit time for him to pledge allegiance to Prigozhin.
City supported Prigozhin during the attempted coup. But when Prigozhin died in a plane crash 2 months later, City was a little more ambiguous.
He said, he kind of dodged the question about what would happen. He was asked, what's going to happen, like you say, after Prigozhin's death. And his answer was, I really don't know. I'm not effective, I don't want to get into that. But we're staying and we're working. And to me, that means the legacy, because during that interview, he was very, very supportive of Wagner and Prigozhin's legacy. Clearly, his message was that legacy is here to stay.
City has worked to keep Prigozhin's companies running in Africa. Satellite images show that a Wagner gold mine in the Central African Republic is still operating. What do we know about Putin's relationship with City?
Our impression is it's pretty much, in a very different sphere and level. I don't think there is any, is a local, extremely well-connected center of power and networker, but the connection point with Putin was at the Prigozhin level. Remember, he's also lived in South African Republic for the past at least 6 years, right? So yeah.
Right, and he's young. He doesn't have the same kind of history that Prigozhin has had with Putin.
Exactly. I would say his relationship. a connection point between all the Wagner business, disinformation, even sometimes military networks, and, for instance, the Russian embassy. We do know that he's got a relationship with the Russian embassy. That's more at that level that things are happening.
And so, in terms of the relationship between sort of the Russian government and Wagner, would you say that the mutiny in Moscow and the plane crash that killed Prigozhin, is that all water under the bridge now?
Oh, I wouldn't say that. I would say anyone who has similar ambitions got the memo, right? You better be fairly low-key at this stage. So I think it's not water under the bridge, which is, it's basically, there's a sense of reset into the Russian political class, that they are red lines, and you think you can cross them when you can't.
In the weeks after Prigozhin's death, the president of the Central African Republic told Moscow that he wants City to stay in Bangui. He said removing Wagner would disrupt his government's efforts to fight rebel groups. City continues to live and work out of a luxurious villa in the country's capital. The villa once served as the president's official residence. And recently, pictures have surfaced of people in Bangui wearing shirts with City's face on them. The shirts were first handed out after City was injured in the December bombing. Earlier this month, City told a Russian newspaper that, quote, "We need to keep working and not lose heart." He added that he continues to work for Russia. That's all for today, Monday, September 25th. The Journal is a co-production of Spotify and The Wall Street Journal. Additional reporting in this episode by Gabrielle Steinhauser. Thanks for listening. See you tomorrow.
This episode is brought to you by Viator. Experiences are what people love the most about travel. With thousands of bookable experiences, Viator has something for everyone, from simple tours to extreme adventures. And with millions of traveler reviews, you'll have all the information to book the best activities. Download the Viator app now and use code Viator10 for 10% off your first booking in the app. One app, over 300,000 travel experiences you'll remember. Do more with Viator.
So, on June 18th, Hardeep Singh Nijjar was in the parking lot of the Sikh temple where he serves as president. It was still broad daylight outside, and it was still busy, and he was in his truck when two masked gunmen shot and killed him in the parking lot.
Last night's homicide was a brazen act of violence outside a place of worship.
The gunmen fled. Nobody knows who they were. The getaway car had been found later, but the police at the time said that they believed it was a targeted murder.
Make no mistake, the Surrey RCMP and the Integrated Homicide Investigation team will put all resources that we can behind this. We'll follow the trail of evidence.
Coming up on Today Explained, how the assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar opened up a diplomatic abyss between two democratic allies, Canada and India.
Support for the show comes from Gold Peak Real Brew Tea. There's a time of day, about an hour before sunset, where the rays feel warm and the breeze feels cool. But that hour of golden bliss is always gone too soon. You might rekindle that feeling with a bottle of Gold Peak. Made with high-quality tea leaves, its smooth taste transports you to golden hour. At any hour. Gold Peak Tea. It's got to be gold.
DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, is keeping us in on the action with great offers every single game day. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Download the app and sign up with code FIELDGOAL. That's code FIELDGOAL. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook. 21 and over. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Physically present in Ohio. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. Eligibility and deposit restrictions apply. Terms at sportsbook.draftkings.com/football terms.
ਤੁਸੀਂ ਅੱਜ ਦਾ ਵਾਕਿਆ ਸੁਣ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ। You're listening to Today Explained.
A lot of people say Sikh, but most Sikhs say Sikh. Canadian citizen Hardeep Singh Nijjar was murdered outside of a Sikh temple in the Vancouver area in June. But the wildest thing about this story didn't happen until last week. And since then, it's just kept snowballing. Nadine Yusuf's been covering it for the BBC from the jump.
There are two competing narratives of who Hardeep Singh Nijjar is. So it depends on who you ask. In the Sikh community in British Columbia, he is a very well-respected community leader, temple leader.
Everyone is so feeling so sad here because he was so good guy.
I have a lot of respect for Mr. Nijjar. He was a very nice person and he was a very able leader.
He also advocated for the creation of a separate independent state for Sikhs in India called Khalistan.
India, home for the Hindu majority. Pakistan, created for Muslims. But Punjab, overlapping the new border, left Sikhs without the independent state they wanted. Today, some Sikhs in Canada continue to call for an independent Khalistan, wanting to claim a large area over northern India.
And he basically always said that he was a peaceful advocate for this.
Just hours before he was killed, Nijjar talked to the congregation about a referendum he was helping organize for an independent Khalistan.
So that's sort of like the narrative of who he is within Canada and when you ask his supporters.
Okay, so community leader, all around good guy, peaceful separatist. What's the other story?
Right. So the second narrative is the one that the Indian government has put forward, that he's a terrorist.
In 2014, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi issued an arrest warrant for Nijjar, calling him the mastermind of the Khalistan Tiger Force, which the Indian government considers a terrorist group.
You know, India has actually tied him to a number of terrorist attacks in the country. There was a cinema bombing in 2007 that killed 6 people. They've also tied him to the assassination of a Sikh politician in India. And as recently as 2020, he was on India's sort of most wanted terrorist list. And last year, I believe the Indian government even issued a cash reward for any information on him. So, you know, up until very recently, he was very much on the Indian government's radar as a wanted terrorist.
In 2022, the RCMP's National Security Division warned Nijjar he was under threat of assassination.
All right, so that's a bit of background on Hardeep Singh Nijjar. How do we go from his death in June to what happened just several days ago when Justin Trudeau said on the floor of Parliament that India was behind this killing?
So, like I mentioned earlier, Hardeep Singh Nijjar was very much respected in his community in British Columbia. And, you know, as soon as he died, the Sikh community had always been very vocal about their suspicions that India was behind the murder. Back in July, there were protests across the country, specifically in Vancouver and Toronto, that were held by supporters of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, supporters of the Khalistan movement. And so these protests were staged across the Indian consulates and the Indian High Commission to demand accountability.
We believe that there's foreign interference involved in this, that the government of India wanted him eliminated, and we feel as a community that he would be a target for that reason.
You know, I should say that of Canadian residents, 2% of those are Sikhs. And so, you know, we're talking about a large community, a sizable community, with a lot of influence and with very deep roots in the country from coast to coast. At the G20 summit in early September, which was held in India, Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau of Canada had a meeting, and by all accounts, it was a very tense meeting.
Canadian government officials acknowledged that Justin Trudeau's relationship with host Narendra Modi is not good. Modi today pushed Trudeau to rein in Sikh separatists in Canada, and Trudeau says he pushed back on Indian interference in Canada.
It was just in the few days after that Justin Trudeau made this bombshell, and it really was a bombshell declaration in the House of Commons on the record. He stood up and said,
"Today I'm rising to inform the House of an extremely serious matter. Over the past number of weeks, Canadian security agencies have been actively pursuing credible allegations of a potential link between agents of the government of India and the killing of a Canadian citizen, Hardeep Singh Nijjar."
He was very careful with the words that he chose, but I think the fact that he said it out loud in such a public forum kind of speaks volumes in and of itself.
Did he present or allude to any smoking gun, to any evidence that would tie the Indian government and Narendra Modi to this assassination?
So of course Trudeau was questioned a lot about this at the onset of him making this accusation. At first the Canadian government was pretty quiet on the nature of the evidence that they have, or even the source of the evidence. They did say that it was shared with their allied countries, so for example the US, the UK, Australia and New Zealand. They all operate under this network called the Five Eyes with Canada, and so all of those countries were privy to that intelligence, but they kept it pretty quiet on what the intelligence actually is. Since then, thanks to the work of journalists at CBC and the New York Times, we've learned that Canada has been briefed on the issue by US intelligence after the death of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. We also learned that Canada had intercepted communication of Indian diplomats, and whatever Canada was able to find within that communication contained the quote-unquote smoking gun that linked the Indian government to the murder. Now, because this is sort of highly classified intelligence, again, we don't really know still much on what exactly the smoking gun was, or even what the US has shared with Canada that sort of gave them the context to look into this. But we do know that it was, compelling enough, at least, to drive the Prime Minister to make the accusation so publicly against India.
And as you said, just, a week or so earlier, Justin Trudeau was in India shaking hands with Narendra Modi. It's not every day a world leader accuses another of committing an assassination in a sovereign country. How did India respond to this accusation?
Jungle Gyms, Fairfield.